and the guy's drink fell off the boat. And he says, at that time, I saw the glass shatter and my career shatter.
Hi, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Becoming the King of Pot. This is our episode 4. I'm Todd Denkin, and with me, of course, is my cousin Bruce, the King of Pot. So, Bruce, last week we ended with you telling us what was happening down in South Florida. You got a lot of loads coming in. You're working with all kinds of great people. You're learning lessons. You're making mistakes, but you're getting bigger, better, stronger, faster, right? So, what's happening? Because it's heat in Miami, right? There's lots of heat because the cocaine cowboys are there. And you're thinking, I got to get out of here. I got to get to California. So tell me how that started and how you ended up in California.
Well, it started actually years and years before when I was sending marijuana in suitcases out to California. However, from 1976 to 1978, I was working with a guy named Tommy. He was a big, brawny guy, Everglades, backwoods guy, real tough as nails, about my height, but about 3 times as wide, solid muscle. And he was a really competent smuggler. He had a plane, he had a boat. And at the early part of 1978, remember I left at the end of 1978, we became partners in a trip to California. We said, let's go pioneer a new smuggling route to the west coast of California. And he had a boat. He had a crab boat up in Alaska. He said, okay, I'll bring it down. And so I had started that move out of the California out to California long before I left, and the advent of the cocaine cowboys and the violent and a lot of heat. So I remember one day I was sitting there with David Tobias, my best friend. I go, David, I'm going to pioneer a new smuggling route from the west coast of Colombia to the west coast of the United States. He goes, what are you, nuts? Colombia doesn't have a west coast. I go, yeah, it does. I go, look. I pull out the map. I said, look, here's the west coast of Colombia. Just go up here somewhere, anywhere along this, from San Diego to Seattle, bring a boat in. He goes, wow, you're right. He goes, it's interesting. David was really a brainiac. He goes, there's 2,000 miles of coastline from Maine to Key West, and another 2,000 miles from Key West around the Gulf to the southern tip of Texas and up the Mississippi. So we got 4,000 miles of coastline where all the smugglers from South Florida were starting to move. I mean, they started bringing loads in Alabama, Mississippi, Texas, up the East Coast, Virginia, New York, including Maine, Georgia, anywhere where there was a coast. Nobody thought to go out to California. So he goes, it's so easy. Plus, the plane loads were coming in from Colombia to South Florida. They even went further up north, North Carolina, South Carolina. But nobody was thinking about going out to California. So I figured, there's no heat out there. I don't like the heat in Florida. There's too many crazy cocaine cowboys with guns and killings and all kinds of bad stuff. And California was really, really mellow. So Tommy and I decided, let's go. We had our different divisions of that workload, and that started early on in the beginning of the year. When I left at the end of the year, finally, that first what we call the crab boat, because it was a 30,000-pound crab boat.
So he was bringing crab down from Alaska, and then you were going to kind of maneuver things, or that first load was...
No, what he was doing, it was a crab boat that fished the Alaskan waters for crabs. And I said to him, this is the first big mistake, and this mistake almost got me killed. I said, Tommy, how much will your boat hold? I don't know very much about boats, even though I was sending them all out to offload constantly. I wasn't a boat person. And so he said, it'll hold 30,000 pounds. That's its capacity. All right. Well, as we learned later, 30,000 pounds of crab and ice is not 30,000 pounds of bales. So it would be about half as much in terms of square footage and cubic yardage inside the hull. So again, a tactical error, stupid mistake on Tommy's part, a mistake that almost got me killed, as we'll see later on in the story, but an innocent mistake. So it's just part of becoming the king of pot, is these kind of things really teach you. I learned my lesson, and it carried on for the rest of my career.
So your buddy Tommy now, he's got this crab boat, and he's coming down to California to meet you. Where are you setting up shop? Are you in Northern California, Southern California? Tell me what's happening.
Okay. Well, first I want to clarify there's three groups in this smuggle venture with the crab boat. So there's Tommy and his rugged Everglades backwoodsman guys. There's the
Right.
Burl brothers up in Northern California because we're going to do a beach landing with Zodiacs. And there's me and my crew. All right, so we're in Florida in 1978 while the boat is moving, and he's bringing his speedboat out to California. He's bringing his airplane out to California. Some of his crew goes out there all during the year. My trucks start going out there. My Avons and Zodiacs start going out there. One of my buses, a couple of my vans. So we're still rocking and rolling in Florida the entire year. We're smuggling planes, boats, offloading, selling loads. Just really, it was amazing time. It was nonstop marijuana smuggling, dealing, or offloading. Planes,
Let me
boats,
ask you a question.
freighters.
When you're moving all of this stuff to California, your boats and your planes and your cars and all of that stuff, is it one big convoy or are people just kind of going randomly?
People going randomly.
Yeah, I got it. Okay.
And at the same time, I was stepping up my sales out in California. At the beginning, I was only sending like 100 pounds at a time on commercial airlines. So then I sent a van with 300 pounds. That went to Seattle. I'm still sending, the loads to San Francisco in the three American touristers, 100 pounds at a time. I sent a bus with 2,500 pounds. Now that bus became an offload spot up in Northern California at our beach landing. That was the plan, to do a beach landing. We bought.
Right, but let's talk about. I just want to back up a little bit. So you're saying you're sending hundreds of pounds to California in commercial airliners? How's that working?
Yeah, earlier what I had done, my first venture out to California was taking 3 American tourist suitcases, put 100 pounds of Santa Marta gold, real high quality, packed it into 3, I flew the first load. I flew out there, met Arthur Promoff in the, make sure it worked. There was no security going through all that like you have today. You just check your bags, pick them up, and I trailered them together, and I started pulling all 3 of them. I get out there, and Arthur goes, "Where's the pot?" Whispers. I go, "In the suitcases." "Oh my God, quick, throw them in the truck." So we threw them in the back of his pickup truck, and off we went. It worked. So then I would hire women like Carol Lane went on one trip. Sally went on a couple trips. So Nancy Breeden went on a couple trips. So I stepped that up because I knew we were going to go out to California with this crab boat load.
So you're sending hot chicks with 3 suitcases full of weed out to California on United Airlines or Eastern or whatever you were using, or Pan Am around at the time? Yeah?
Yep.
Wow, that's crazy.
Yep. So, all right, so little by little, you don't do in a convoy like you thought. I'll send a van out there. I still use my vans in Florida. One of them goes out there. The bus goes out there. Keep the bus there. Move it up to Northern California, where Dale and Charlie from the Burl brothers, who had the beach. So the plan was, Tommy would take care of the boat. That was his job. I would provide the pot in Colombia because I had the Colombian connection. I would provide the offload, and I would provide the sales. So my offload was in Northern California. I met a group called Charlie and Dale, who were called the Burl brothers. For years, probably 5-6 years at that point, I had been buying redwood burl from them. And we were really good friends. And they actually had done a Mexican offload at a place called Hidden Beach. What a great name for smuggling, because that's what it is, a hidden beast.
Right.
Better than that, exactly 5 miles offshore, 4.9 miles, is a big rock 2,600 feet up in the air, all by itself, called Redding Rock. So if it's foggy, it didn't matter because the radar on the boat would find that rock. And we would meet on the south part of the plan was to meet with one of the Zodiacs, on the south side of that rock, bring the boat right in at the back side of where the waves were breaking, anchor it there so you're as close to shore as you can get, and then bring the Zodiacs out. When you do a smuggle, you got to watch and calculate every single thing. There's a million little details. So in a beach landing, a Zodiac would take 1,000 pounds. So you had 2 guys in a Zodiac. You had a 35 horsepower Johnson motor. Anything heavier, you couldn't handle the Zodiac when you wanted to pull it with 1,000 pounds up onto the beach. A 55 pounds engine would be too heavy. All right? So you got to calculate all that stuff. Okay, so here's how it worked. At least, and we practiced this untold dry runs over and over and over again to make sure you had it right. Because you're
I
coming
think I
in.
even have a picture. I have a picture of you pulling a Zodiac, into the water
Yeah.
on a practice run. Yeah.
That's exactly what that was. It was a practice run. Okay, let's launch it. How many people does it take to launch it? Can one person do it? Can two people do it? So we worked out the formula. The formula was 2 people per Zodiac. They go out to the boat, which is right as close to shore as possible without being in the waves. You're in the calm of the Pacific Ocean and not breaking waves rolling in. And you put 1,000 pounds in. It goes up. It rides a wave, rides the back of a wave in. So going in was real easy. Going out was really tough because of waves coming in, and these Zodiacs would go like this, and they're inflatable rubber boats, so they would literally bend like this and go over the wave, and then the next one would come, the same thing. It was a little bit hairy because you're at an angle like this if the waves are big. So, but on coming in, it's no sweat. So you come in, the wave breaks on the beach, 2 guys in the boat and 2 guys on shore. Took 4 people to pull up because we tested. We put wood in there. Okay, this is 1,000 pounds. All right, can we easily pull it up? And then how far back can the 4-wheel drive vans go? The 4-wheel drive van could hold 2,000 pounds. So one Zodiac would come in, we'd load 1,000 pounds in the van. Next one would come in while that one went back out, put 1,000 pounds, and then the van would have to go 4-wheel drive in the sand up a back hill, a back logging road. Charlie and Dale had permission to be on the beach. It was a state beach called Hidden Beach, right? Because they were loggers, they had permission to take the big redwood driftwood into their logging business and make redwood burl tables and sell them to people like me or along Highway 101. So every little detail. Okay, so you go up the hill. Nelson, the bodyguard, would be up on the top of the hill with a rider truck. And we had a rider truck. We rented a rider truck in the dry runs, drove the vehicles. It was too wet to get up there one day. So we took these things, I don't know what they're called. They're aluminum, big aluminum pieces that in World War II, they used them for runways for airplanes. And so we used those on the steep part. We ran out those, great traction, made it up. And then you got to drive the boat, the big truck, off the property. Guards everywhere. It's a back logging road, not the main road. So there was a locked door, all right, that they had the key to because they had permission. And make sure there's a guard there, in the middle of the night. So nobody was there. You go down to 101, hang a right, which is a south, and you go to about 4 miles to Charlie and Dale's Road, which led up to 360 acres of property that they owned at the top of the hill. Again, a gate. My bus was up there. We had a bunch of wetsuits because it was freezing cold. That was another element. We all had walkie-talkies, so we're all in communication. The next rider truck would go in after that one was gone and do the same thing over again. A little thing you have to worry about everything. He had bears on his property, so we had to be cognizant of bears. What happens if a bear comes up and tries to eat you in the middle of weighing the pot in?
Right. What was the defense to a bear?
Shoot him.
Oh.
I mean, I wouldn't shoot them, but they were, they did. They were mountain men. You got this rough, tough Everglades group, rough, tough mountain loggers, and our smuggling group. All right, so the next thing is there was a ranger there. There's a park ranger, and he was north of where we were going to offload. So what are you going to do if the park ranger decides to wake up in the middle of the night and patrol for whatever? All right, so you take a bunch of logs and driftwood and you block the sand so his 4-wheel drive Jeep can't come down to where we are. And at the same time, in case something happens, he gets out and moves it around. Unlikely. Dale, who was good friends with him, would be on location to bribe him. All right, so we don't want to shoot him in the middle of an offload. So he said, Bruce, no problem. I know the guy really well. I grew up with him. I can bribe him. He's cool. But you got to worry about that contingency. So none of this stuff is easy. Oh, coming in on the Zodiacs. This is a very interesting piece. We're in Northern California. There's rocks everywhere along the shore. So what Cecil did, he would, this is his job. He was one of my crew. You put 3 lanterns up on the cliff. It was a pretty high cliff. And if you're coming in on a Zodiac and those lanterns, and this is standard nautical stuff, are lined up in a straight line, you're coming straight in. If they're off center, like the middle one is over here and the one's top is here, and then you're going to hit a rock, okay, and you're going to die because those rocks would slice you to ribbons.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I find that interesting that, back then there's no easy way to communicate. There's no, there's no cell phones, there's no GPS, right? There's none of that stuff. And you got to do it the old fashioned way with lanterns on a cliff.
Well, the lanterns were on a cliff were to visually get them to come in on a dark night.
Yeah, like a landing strip, right? Like when a pilot's landing a plane, yeah.
Right. But we did have walkie-talkies. They had walkie-talkies on, somehow attached to their shoulder.
Yeah.
Right? So we had very sophisticated walkie-talkies. We were all in touch with each other. Like Nelson would call the gate. Is it clear? Clear. We had signals for what that meant. So the truck would drive out, and then there was a truck that would lead it and a truck that would follow it. So you had a pretty big crew, a lot of crew, and each one did a different thing. And you had to take everything into consideration, and you had to do a lot of dry runs, which we did. Now, a funny story is we're doing these, like the picture you have, that's in the middle of the daytime, right?
Yeah.
We went out there. That was an amazing trip. When we were out there, we were whale watching, actually, but we were still practicing, and 6 whales converged on that Zodiac.
Wow.
2 were out to sea, 2 were in to sea, and 2 were even with us, and they all converged. Scary as heck. I had my son, Aubrey. Craig was in the boat, Marianne, and we all had life jackets, and it's like a semi bearing down on you, but it was incredible. They went right under the boat, right in front of the boat, right behind the boat. If they would have been 2 feet higher above the water, they would have broken the surface 2 feet closer to Zodiac. We would have rocked, and maybe they didn't. They knew exactly how much wave action they created for that boat and didn't bother us at all. So that was a very thrilling experience.
I bet. I bet. Yeah. When you see an animal, that large, you feel so insignificant, don't you?
Oh yeah, you really do. Yeah, it's
Right.
it's hard to describe the ecstatic feeling you get being that close to an animal that big.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So one of the things is we said, let's practice at night. Okay, we're going to go down. So we take the 4-wheel drive vehicle, and there's a whole system. You had the Zodiac in the back of the van. You open it, you pull it out, you launch it, and it's pitch black. You can't see a thing. All you can do is hear these giant waves crashing on the beach. And we're going to practice at night because we're simulating a real offload. And we look at each other, and we go, maybe we should wait for the daytime. So anyway,
there's got to be a little moonlight out there. No moonlight, or is it overcast because you're in Northern Cal?
Not yeah, but there's fog was very famous for coming in Northern California, especially that time of year. This is coming. The boat was due in January, first part of January of '79. So untold millions of dollars, everything's set up, and now they go down there, and we're ready for the story about how the boat sank and almost got me killed. We ready for that one?
Yeah, of course.
Okay.
So where are we? Is this like smuggle number 2? Is this the first time with Tony? Or what set us up for a little bit.
Okay. This is the first smuggle with Tommy. Okay. All right. So, and our entree into California. All right. Our first smuggle. So my job was to get the 30,000 pounds to the beach. Now, to get the 30,000 pounds to the beach in Western Colombia is no easy task. There's a whole an entire logistical setup down there. Punta Rojo is called Red Bud. We're going to compete against Northern California homegrown and occasionally Thai loads that would come in. Really, really, really strong marijuana. So we had to get the best that we could get in large amounts, and that was Punta Rojo. You couldn't get that much Santa Marta Gold. This was smaller loads. So that grew in the interior of Colombia, in the middle, not on the West Coast. So we had to fly it over in DC-6s, DC-4s, DC-3s, over 3 mountain ranges.
Wait a second, let's back up a little bit. So you're saying that all of the pot comes from the east side of Colombia, right, on the East Coast and into, I don't know, several miles, I'm sure, inland, right? And you're trying to get it to the other side of the country completely.
Yeah, and there is no roads there, and there's no landing strips on the west side over there. There's nothing. It's all jungle and wild.
Right,
Right.
just indigenous life.
Right. Okay, so you take it, you put in DC-3s, 4s, and 6s, you fly it over, you drop it on the beach, making sure that the plane doesn't make a mistake and drop it in the water and get it all wet, and making sure that when it hits the beach, it doesn't break open. Okay, that was one of the first things that we had to overcome. First, overcome getting it to the West Coast. Now, you have the Andes Mountains, which is one of the 3 mountain ranges. It's the tallest mountain range in the Western Hemisphere. So you got to go over that. You got to get very sophisticated pilots. They were all actually airline pilots. Colombian, I think Avianco is the airlines down there. And they were pilots from that and military, ex-military. And they would drop it on the beach. We had to hire an entire village to gather it and store it. So step one, then we had to double wrap it with super, strong burlap to keep it from breaking open, because a bunch of them broke open the first few times.
Yeah. Wait a second. You just kind of glanced over. We had to hire an entire village. What is that story? What do you mean you have to hire a whole village?
Well, Aquaconti is a small fishing village. The population's maybe 600 at the, men, women, children, and they're a fishing village. We hired the entire village. Every able body would be there to pick up the load, and then we'd give we'd pay the money after the boat came and took the pot away. The Colombians would pay them to the chief, and then he would disperse it however whatever deal they had. But it's very, very lucrative. Way more money than they ever made fishing. So step one, keep the bales from breaking. Step two, keep the bales out of the rain. So they built an entire structure for us later. After a couple bales got wet and they said, no, this is no good, they built a structure to keep the water off the bales. Again, a very big, it was real easy for me to show David with my finger. Here, look, west coast of Colombia, just go up to here. Go down and up. That's easy. It's an 8,000-mile round trip from San Francisco. Coming from Alaska, add on another 2,000 miles, and then going past San Francisco up to Hidden Beach, you got another 300. So you got over a 10,000-mile sea journey. Not like coming in from the Bahamas in the old days in Florida.
Yeah, that's no joke. 10,000 miles on the ocean.
Yeah, and it's the Pacific Ocean. Is there's no landmarks. It's an unforgiving, rough, tough ocean. You got rough, rugged, tough seamen. You can see some of this TV series now about, I don't know what they call, they're out there fishing for tuna or something. Those seas are, fierce.
Oh, yes, no doubt.
Okay, so.
Yeah, Deadliest Catch, you got to watch that show. And it's like, why does anyone do that for a living?
Exactly. Yeah. Okay. Marijuana was a lot more fun. I didn't realize how gladly and easily the fishermen on the West Coast would embrace marijuana smuggling.
Yeah.
All right, so now, so Tommy says there's 30,000 pounds. I ordered 30,000 pounds. We can now have 30,000 pounds on the beach in Western Colombia. All right, so they start loading up, and lo and behold, it's not even close to being able to hold 30,000 pounds of marijuana. They got 17,000 pounds on board the boat. That was it. And they actually stacked it on the deck. Now, this boat had a boom like this, and they had a tarp. And they figured, okay, we'll stack it on the deck because we'll be able to cover it with this tarp. So they covered it with this tarp. But the second tarp that they had was stolen by the Colombians sometime during the onload. So they said, you can see these bales are way out, right out in the open. But, it's okay. We only got 17,000. We had to leave 13,000 on the beach. Let's head home.
And I got to go 5,000 miles in the ocean with open, a non-covered stack of marijuana bales?
Yeah. But it's not that bad because out in the middle of the Pacific, there's nobody there. We think that it's easy to find a boat or see a boat. If you're looking for a boat, it's almost impossible to find it. So you're pretty much invisible out there.
Got it.
All right. So the first thing that happened is that the boat radio. Now, Tommy, when I first met Tommy, he lived in the middle of the Everglades. He had this giant tower, ham tower, and on the ham radio, and that's how he would keep touch with his boats. But he also had single sideband. He had UHF, VHF. He had airplane avionics on it. That's where I learned a lot about my radio and communication skills from Tommy, which I then employed out in California later in that motorhome, which we'll talk about. So he's in touch with the boat the whole time, and they start saying, our battery is dying and our alternator is dead. We need a new alternator. Otherwise, we're not going to make it because the battery is going to die, and they need the bilge pump because it was taking on water. So he goes in his plane. Luckily, he had a plane out there, and he flies out, and he actually took a while, but he found them. Well, he found them because they told him the exact coordinates, and so he was able to, after a little while, finally find it. You take a Clorox bottle, you tie the alternator to it, and then you take a long ribbon. So when he throws it out the window, they can see where it's going to land from the ribbon, and then it's floating because the Clorox bottle is keeping it from sinking. They grabbed the alternator, they replaced it. So we did know that was a situation on the boat, that the alternator was replaced and that they were taking on water was a situation, and the batteries would die if they didn't have the alternator. They got the alternator in, everything's fine. Now they're continuing their journey. This happened a little bit south of San Diego, about 100, 200 miles out to sea.
That's crazy. Well, so talk about the logistics it takes to go get an alternator for a boat that's in the middle of the ocean. Then you got to go get a plane and a pilot and guys to drop it. Talk about just how difficult that really is to do.
Well, it is very difficult, except in this particular case, Tommy was a pilot, and so it was his plane. So he flew out. Otherwise, we would have rented a plane, and we would have paid a pilot off and gone out there and done it. But, logistically, it's not as simple as me just saying it or me just pointing on a map and going up and down. There's a million little details. And I learned those details through 7 years. It was a 7-year cycle in Florida where we were really rocking and rolling big time. And you do all these mistakes that you make and others make that you learn from. Okay.
Right.
So now they're coming up, San Francisco. Everybody's, up north. Everybody's in their wetsuit. Everyone's on perfect. Everything's going good. We're all waiting for the boat. And the next thing you know, we get a call. And it's the captain and the one crew. There was two. They're off the boat, and they're on land. And we go, what is going on? So here's the story that they tell. And we believe the story. It really happened this way. A Coast Guard boat.
Allegedly.
No, after running it to ground a lot, okay, we've figured out that they were telling the true story. But so anyways, here's what happened. A Coast Guard plane overflew the boat. They see the bales on the deck. They circle around. They come back around. They see the bales, and they can see the guy looking out the window, looking at their bales. They go, oh, my God, we're going to be busted. So they concocted a plan to pull into Point Reyes, which is a tip north of San Francisco, and get close to it, row ashore in their dinghy, and put the boat on autopilot in this particular direction, northwest. And the theory was they knew Tommy had a speedboat, and they knew he had a plane. They figured, Tommy will find the boat, and if the Coast Guard doesn't bust it the next day or the day after, we'll take the speedboat out to the boat, get back on, and continue the journey. That was the plan. However, Tommy's out there looking for the boat, and he can't find it. And these guys are in a hotel room with me and my brother Craig and explaining what happened. And we're saying, this is crazy. In my wildest imagination, and I've got a wild imagination, I would have never dreamed that I had a boat full of marijuana heading off to Timbuktu in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. Okay.
Right. I would love to hear the story of the folks that found that boat.
Okay. Yeah. So what we assumed happened, somebody could have found it, but that was probably unlikely, is that because it was taking on water, the boat, this is just logical sense, the pumps, the bilge pumps would have lost their prime.
Sure.
And it would have taken on water. No bilge pumps are working. No water's being pumped down. And it taken on more and more and more water until it sank. That's the 99.9% about what really did happen to that boat. You know?
Sounds like you set yourself up for a big treasure hunt.
Yeah. I mean, now, could a fisherman have found the boat, offloaded, and sank the boat? I mean, can you imagine finding a boatload of marijuana with nobody on it?
Crazy.
So that could have happened, but that's a 1% chance. All right, so now we're back in the hotel room, and these guys are explaining it, and Craig is saying, you know, they got their heads down, they're all embarrassed and pretty tired from this massive long journey that they went on from Alaska to Colombia and back again.
Right.
And by the way, there's a million things in getting a boat prepared: the fuel, the electronics, the food, you know, the survival gear, you know,
water,
fuel, fuel, everything.
Yeah.
And where to stop on the way down, because you can't stop on the way up. And all those logistics had to be taken care of. But that was Tommy's job. So now we're sitting there with these captain and crew, and Craig pulls out his gun. And I go, for the second time, "What are you doing?" He goes, "Well, we might as well just shoot him now because the Colombians and kill him because the Colombians are going to kill us."
Right.
You know? Because I'm responsible for that load. I owed a lot of money for that load. No one in their right mind is going to believe that the boat sank. They want to know if the boat got busted. If it got busted, it would be okay. If there was newspaper articles say the boat, you know, the Mary Smith or whatever the name was, got busted, and here's the captain and crew are in jail, we got to bail them out, then you don't pay for anything.
Right. You said you owed a lot of money. How much?
$75 a pound. So 75 times 17,000, whatever that comes to. 1.7
$75 a pound. That's what it was.
Yeah. So maybe $1.5 million around that now.
1.275.
So in today's dollars, 10 million, and $25.
Yeah.
So a lot of money. We had paid $10 a pound up front, which was standard. All right, so we owed $65 a pound. No pot, no boat. All right. So now
you sold it for how much? I mean, normally you would sell it for how much?
$3.25.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
That's a nice margin.
Well, it's a nice margin, but keep in mind, California homegrown at that time was selling for $5,000 a pound.
Oh, wow.
Now, we were nowhere near as expensive or good as California homegrown, but we were way less. So people, I mean, it would take us 2 weeks to sell a load. All done.
Got it.
All right, so now I have to explain this to the Colombians, and we're completely out of money. We all, we rented houses, we bought, bought all this equipment, blew our wealth on this trip because, we didn't expect it to sink. Everything was perfect. And they go, "What happened?" And the captain is explaining it to the Colombians too. It wasn't just me. And they didn't know what to do. So they said, "Bruce, we got to go for a ride." So now I got my friend Mike, who I worked with in Florida, supplying me loads for 2 years prior to this. He goes, "We got to go for a ride." So I'm in the front seat, Mike's driving, and his Colombian's in back. And he goes, "Tell me what happened." And I explained to him what happened. And look, I don't know what happened. I mean, I'm here. I'm responsible. And it sort of made sense. So he didn't shoot me. Okay. When you're in that situation, you have one thing only. You have your word. And if they think you're lying, you're dead. If they think you're telling the truth, you live. So consequently, you learn to tell the truth. Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, everyone makes mistakes. If you're not making a mistake, I get to call you God. Until then, mistakes are human, and you learn by your mistakes and you correct it. It's not in smuggling. It's not if you make a mistake or not. It's if you make a mistake or something goes wrong, how fast you can pivot and correct that mistake.
Yeah.
How well prepared are you?
Well, just like any business, though. Sounds like business.
Yeah. Except these are more, wild, adventurous,
Oh,
life
no,
and death
100%.
business.
But, you were really a young entrepreneur, right? Just making money, right?
Yeah. And having a lot of fun. And
Yeah.
All right, so now there's no way. I thought they believed me, and they sort of did. But then a few months later, Mike says, we found a boat named, let's say, Mary Colette, okay, named Mary Colette, which is the same name of the crab boat, down in San Diego, and they took pictures of it. I go, there's 100 boats called Mary Colette. Think about a name of a boat. How many boats are named the same boat name? A lot of them. So eventually they believed us and canceled whatever, the $10 a pound, that was it. And then they sent us another load. So Tommy and his crew went back to Florida. We were scrambling. Craig went back to Florida. Mark and Marianne and Bearded Steve went back to Florida. And probably a year later, early 1980, this happened all in 79. Yeah. 78 I left, the end of 78. This all is the entire year of 79. And in beginning of 1980 is when the first of my boatloads, the first offload happened. We did one offload before we started rock and rolling bringing in our own loads.
Who was the offload for?
It was a New York group. Dominic was the guy from New York, and he had a captain called Slow Dave. We called him Slow Dave. Slow Dave was great. He was a tugboat
Slow
captain.
Dave.
And he would drive down the freeway thinking he's in a tugboat going 8 knots an hour. Everyone's beeping at him, and Dave, speed up, speed up. And Dave, he was an alcoholic, and this is my first experience with alcoholism. And he was a tugboat captain in Port Everglades in Florida. What he would do, he would pull his boat towards a ship that he was going to, tender, and maneuver it into the dock. And at the very last second, he would turn it sideways, right, and come barely and kiss it. He was a really good captain. He could do that. And one time, he said he's watching his boss on the boat that he's heading towards with the captain of that boat, with a glass of wine or drinking some wine. And he goes and does that thing and goes to turn the boat, and the brakes don't work. The reverse doesn't work. And he crashes right into the side of the boat, and the guy's drink fell off the boat onto the front of his boat. It's his tugboat, shattered. And he says, at that time, I saw the glass shatter and my career shatter.
Oh, that's funny. That's why you shouldn't drink and drive, because you might hit a bump and spill your drink.
There you go. So he became a smuggler, and he was a great guy, again, slow.
But
Dave.
he was really slow.
He was really slow. He was from Maine.
Dave will be here, but in 3 weeks, right?
Yeah. So that was our first entree to California. Now we're totally living in California, that we have no houses in Florida. We moved out of all of our houses. Everything I owned is in Ukiah. Craig had a Ukiah house. Mark and Steve had a Ukiah house. But they went back to Florida because we're all broke to do some business there. Oh, Craig went back because he had a court case. He was busted for 500 pounds in one of the Fort Lauderdale houses, and so he had to go back for sentencing.
I want to talk to your brother Craig so we can, get his point of view as to what was happening. Want to hear how he was probably chomping at the bit, right, during his probation, trying to get back to California. And we'll talk about the next venture in California as, you're starting to build out your organization and really start to do some big smuggles from San Francisco. All right?
It's a perfect time to end, because we did the offload. I made enough money to really explode out in California. Everything I learned in the 7 years in Florida, the 1 year in California, now took hold, and I basically became the king of pot during that period.
Oh, wow. So that was the point. That was the smuggle. That was the point that you became the king.
Shortly after that, yeah.
Yeah. Awesome. All right. Anything else to add?
I think that's pretty much sums it up. I mean, every time I tell these stories or think about it or take my notes, I remember more and more little details. And the main thing I remember, how complex and how you had to focus on 1,000 little things to make it all work.
Yeah, I bet. All right. So like I said, next week, we'll talk to Brother Craig. who was really side by side with you through most of all of this smuggling, right?
Yeah, and he became known as the dock master because he ran the dock.
Got it. All right. Well, that's coming up next week. Make sure you guys come back and join us. Bruce Perlowin, he's the King of Pot. I'm Todd Denkin. We'll see you next time.